We tell doctors our deepest secrets, intensely personal information we'd never trust to anyone else. Those doctors are bound by law to keep your medical information confidential. So imagine how violated you'd feel if your boss got a hold of that information and shared it with complete strangers. That's exactly what some RCMP officers are accusing their superiors of doing. As Vashi Kapelos explains, the accusation goes right to the top of the police force.
It's hard not to feel a stir of patriotism at the sight of the RCMP. The red serge and Stetson hat, the stuff of Canadian legend. But with each new scandal, that legend is getting a little more tarnished. Sexual harassment accusations that now involve 500 female members. A rash of high-profile workplace-related suicides. And a racism problem acknowledged by none other than Commissioner Bob Paulson.
I understand that there are racists in my police force.
Now there's a new scandal brewing. Senior commanders embroiled in a nasty legal feud, accused of breaching the medical privacy of long-serving police officers.
A manager or officer in the RCMP who's not a doctor has no right to see your medical file.
Dave Reichert and Rolly Beaulieu claim the RCMP illegally got a hold of their confidential medical files and passed them around without consent.
Some of the stuff is personal. It's got nothing to do with work. But they started looking at absolutely everything, and we were kept in the dark. We were not told that they were using our files.
These were highly regarded Mounties. So much so that Dave Reichert was entrusted to guard the most famous people in the world. He even had a personal audience with the Pope in 1984.
I retired as a sergeant, and I had 33 and a half years. It was a pretty good career, up to about 5 years left, and that's where it kind of went sideways.
Rolly Beaulieu joined the RCMP in 1987. After years of distinguished service, both men say they were constantly harassed by superior officers.
When I joined the RCMP, I was so proud to wear the red serge. I made it with the best. And for a lot of my career, it was good, until I started to see what was going on, and it wasn't nice.
Struggling with work-related mental health issues, both Rolly and Dave began seeing longtime police psychologist Mike Webster.
Good to see you. Looking good.
But those treatment sessions they thought were confidential were anything but.
They had their medical information compromised, and they suffered from a variety of different disorders, and they were treated very poorly by the RCMP.
Why is it so important that that information be kept confidential?
Sharing your private medical information is not only a mistake, but it is unlawful. It's illegal. You can't do that. There are some medical conditions that would be embarrassing to a person to know that their boss or their co-workers knew about this condition. And I think the other reason would be it could be used against you.
It turns out the RCMP does have access to its members' sensitive personal information. And here's why. The RCMP's insurance covers the cost of treatments, but only on the condition that doctors send detailed reports back to the RCMP's in-house health services department. So unlike almost every other employer in Canada, employee health records are under the RCMP's control. Psychologist Jeff Morley says Mounties have long been suspicious about how much medical information the RCMP has on them and how it's being used.
The RCMP are saying, hey, we need to know if the member is mentally healthy. They're out in the street with a gun. And I don't disagree with that. But what the RCMP asks is a lot more questions. They don't just ask, is this member okay to be out on the street? They want to know the details of what's going on, why more counseling is needed.
Last year, Assistant Commissioner Gilles Moreau tried to reassure RCMP members that medical information is only used for their safety and the Canadians they protect.
We're not as concerned with what is being said to the health professional that's treating the member. What we would need from that treating physician or psychologist is What's the impact on his work? Can this person still perform his or her duties as a police officer? That is the information that we're looking for.
That's a lie. It's a lie.
Well, it's not the truth.
If that was true, why would a manager even have access to someone's file to cause a privacy breach?
The RCMP should not have its own health services within the organization.
I've never seen anything like this from any other employer.
In addition to Dave and Rolly, 3 more of Dr. Webster's patients allegedly had their privacy breached. Lawyer Sebastian Anderson is representing them in a lawsuit against the RCMP.
The Health Services Office is supposed to be the repository for this confidential medical information, which they're supposed to use for the purposes of the Health Services Office and no other. So that information is not supposed to leave the Health Services Office. It's not supposed to be disclosed to line officers or administrative management. In this case, it was.
Anderson says since filing the lawsuit in October, even more Mounties have come forward to accuse the RCMP of breaching their privacy. And he says RCMP Commissioner Bob Paulson knew all about it.
It's remarkable. Here we have the top cop in Canada, and if he doesn't understand the law and his administrators don't understand the law, who can we count on?
Dr. Webster treated RCMP officers for more than 20 years. He says he saw privacy breaches happening in the organization all the time.
Somebody will find out something, go to coffee, whisper to somebody else, and before you know it, it's all over the detachment.
And that's just the culture?
That's the culture.
But the question remains, why would a police force betray its own members? Anderson believes it's because all of them were patients of Dr. Webster, a persistent critic of the RCMP.
Do you think it's a personal vendetta?
It certainly was a personal vendetta. The reason that they went after him was because he was publicly critical of the RCMP.
You call what happened next a witch hunt. Pretty serious words.
Yes.
What does that mean?
It means the RCMP set out to discredit me.
Next, top RCMP dig into private matters.
What does that say about the RCMP?
It tells me that Mr. Paulson and his administrative staff think that they're above the law.
When the RCMP looked through the personal medical records of some of its members in 2012, they pulled out information they would end up using in a complaint to the BC College of Psychologists against Dr. Mike Webster.
They set out on a campaign where they went on a witch hunt to get me.
Dr. Webster had treated Mounties with mental health issues for more than 2 decades. His reports made no secret of his disdain for RCMP management.
I tend to be very straightforward, and I would often say when I wrote my reports that there's nothing wrong with this individual. What's wrong is your organization. They're reacting to a stressor in their lives, and you are their stressor.
He blasted the RCMP at a public inquiry over the fatal tasering of Robert Jakanski in 2009.
The moment they walked in the front doors, it was over.
And repeatedly accused the top brass of fostering a toxic workplace. The RCMP filed a formal complaint with the BC College of Psychologists in 2012. In it, they raised concerns that Dr. Webster's derogatory comments could be harmful to the members he was treating.
So what ultimately came of the complaint they filed against you?
Ultimately, it was overturned. They were laughable. They looked like Keystone cops.
The RCMP lost, but in the process of filing the complaint, they had also revealed confidential information about their own members. 16x9 has obtained internal communications that show top commanders authorized the complaint. Anderson says the RCMP chose to do that, even after health services personnel had reported months earlier that some of the members were at increased risk of suicide.
Ultimately, Commissioner Paulson gave the go-ahead to disclose the information.
Were you surprised by that?
Shocked.
Lawyer Sebastian Anderson says using members' confidential medical files was illegal, and the RCMP should have known that.
It doesn't speak very highly of them, either as managers or law enforcement officers.
And that isn't just Anderson's opinion. In a report obtained by 16 by 9, Canada's Federal Privacy Commissioner concluded in November of 2014 that the RCMP did break the law.
What does that say about the RCMP?
It tells me that Mr. Paulson and his administrative staff think that they're above the law.
We wanted to speak with Commissioner Paulson and the minister in charge of the RCMP, Ralph Goodale. Both declined our request for an interview. But Goodale did send us a statement which says the RCMP is making efforts to promote a culture of accountability, responsibility, and transparency, and a safe, healthy, and respectful workplace for its employees. In the end, the RCMP's attempt to discredit Dr. Webster's professional integrity failed. But for his patients, there were serious consequences.
And so I was left in a lurch. I didn't know where to go, what to do. I had no help. They didn't offer any. They didn't check up on me. They could care less about his patients.
Rolly Beaulieu was still struggling with his mental health in 2013 when he was singled out by Commissioner Paulson during a public hearing on harassment in the RCMP.
I understand you wanted to hear from Corporal Roland Beaulieu from British Columbia, and you were concerned that he didn't come to testify. My understanding of what our doctors told him was essentially that if you can go to Ottawa to testify, surely to God you can get back to work in some capacity in British Columbia.
And I'd ask you, what sort of message do you think that sends to people who maybe have a complaint or a concern and they want to come forward, but they can see that they can be publicly singled out in a very, very public environment? I mean, what sort of leadership from the top is that? Have we just seen?
Sebastian Anderson says it's the same kind of leadership Paulson displayed when he authorized the release of his employees' confidential medical information.
The RCMP and this administration thinks that it's above the law because it has breached the law. It's been told it's breached the law by the Privacy Commissioner, and it has taken no steps to remedy it. No one's even said, "I'm sorry."
Dave Reichert and Rolly Beaulieu are retired, but they're still trying to warn members about their experiences. On a rainy night in December, we joined them on a visit to the RCMP detachment in Surrey, BC.
How you doing?
You remember?
Yeah.
The RCMP had been informed of the visit hours earlier. They knew what Dave and Rolly were doing, but they still showed up to keep an eye on us.
Oh, what do we got here?
And while we were talking to them, another officer began to search Dave and Rolly's car. No warrant and no questions asked.
Hey! Hey! Gotta go talk to this guy.
Rolly says this is the kind of treatment he's come to expect from the RCMP.
That's my car.
He filed a formal harassment complaint, one of about 150 the RCMP receives from members every year. But only a small fraction of them get resolved. That's why Rolly and Dave say, when it comes to the alleged privacy breach, the courts are their only real chance to get a fair hearing.
They wouldn't even address it. They wouldn't even pick up the phone and say, "Hey, listen, we'd like to talk about it," because they just don't want to admit anything. So there really was nobody to assist us. Nobody. And that's why we have to end up going through the court process.
Anderson says, since filing the lawsuit, the number of complaints about privacy breaches in the RCMP has multiplied. The RCMP officers making those complaints are part of a growing group, Mounties who protect Canadians, now wondering who will protect them from their bosses.
We got an overwhelming response. We were surprised by how many responses that we actually received from individuals who claim that their personal health information has been disclosed without their consent.
There is no oversight, so they're not accountable to anybody. There was nobody there to help you. They were there to destroy you. In other words, shut up and take it, or we're going to destroy you. They're out of control, completely.
Next, still waiting for the right to die.
As the waiting time continues, I keep trying to fight this battle.
And Stetson hat, the stuff of Canadian legend. But with each new scandal, that legend is getting a little more tarnished. Sexual harassment accusations that now involve 500 female members. A rash of high-profile workplace-related suicides. And a racism problem acknowledged by none other than Commissioner Bob Paulson.
I understand that there are racists in my police force.
Now, there's a new scandal brewing. Senior commanders embroiled in a nasty legal feud, accused of breaching the medical privacy of long-serving police officers.
A manager.
We tell doctors our deepest secrets, intensely personal information we'd never trust to anyone else. Those doctors are bound by law to keep your medical information confidential. So imagine how violated you'd feel if your boss got a hold of that information and shared it with complete strangers. That's exactly what some RCMP officers are accusing their superiors of doing. As Vashi Kapelos explains, the accusation goes right to the top of the police force.
It's hard not to feel a stir of patriotism at the sight of the RCMP. The red cert
Or officer in the RCMP who's not a doctor has no right to see your medical file.
Dave Reichert and Rolly Beaulieu claim the RCMP illegally got a hold of their confidential medical files and passed them around without consent.
Some of the stuff is personal. It's got nothing to do with work. But they started looking at absolutely everything, and we were kept in the dark. We were